Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 224, and we're going to talk about various topics all related to value. Well, if you've been watching the news, you know that the gold price has hit a high, 2,720 dollars and 80 cents. That is in US dollars. This time last year, it was $720 lower at around hovering around $2,000. A year before that, it was $1,650. So 2 years ago, it was a full $1,000 lower. And then in 2019, that would be 5 years before today, it was around 1,500. So what does that mean for me? In other words, so gold price is steadily rising higher at a faster speed. And what does that mean? What does that say to me? Well, first thing that it says is that inflation is getting worse. It's not that gold is gaining value. It's just that the dollars we use to purchase gold is losing value. And the reason is because there are too many dollars being printed. Right. And so the more dollars that are in circulation, the lower the value of those dollars are going to be. And this is a danger signal for long-term dollar holders, right? So people who are holding on to dollars long-term, like in treasuries or CDs, certificates of deposit, or savings bonds, treasury bonds. Uh, so it and so people who are holding onto dollars for 30 years, for example, 30-year treasury, well, it's kind of a problem, because you're holding onto these dollars, but you're going to cash out or it's going to mature. But the dollars that you thought you were going to get are cannot purchase as much as they did before when you first bought the treasury 30 years ago. Hmm. So dollar denominated assets like homes, stocks, those are also under threat. I mean, but it's hard to see. A lot of people have difficulty seeing it. Um, so nominally, people think they have more. The value of their homes, their stocks are increasing. So it's kind of hard to imagine that the actual value is lower, especially if you really don't understand inflation. If you're wealthy enough to have stocks and a home, it's possible, maybe even likely, that you don't really feel the pinch of inflation at this point. In other words, if you were lower income, you didn't have these kinds of assets whose dollar values are going up, it's harder to make ends meet, right? You're not making enough, not only not to own assets like a home and stocks, but everyday grocery shopping is becoming more difficult. Now, I've talked about this before, but it's worth going over again. In 1971, the average wage of a middle class family was $9,500 in 1971. In 2024, the average wage, I just looked it up, is between 62,000 and 63,000. So well, let's call it $62,500. So it seems like the people's wages have gone up over 600%, it seems like. And so people are saying, wow, I'm making so much more than I did before. But if you price it in gold, that is something which has a stable value. You can't inflate an ounce of gold. So if you price it in gold, in 1971, you were paid in 225.1 ounces of gold. 225. Now, if you were to be paid in gold today, especially today with the price hitting $2,720.80, then you are looking at an annual wage of over $600,000. So obviously it's a little bit higher than just a couple weeks ago where I said it was $550,000 per year. But that's the thing, that the gold price measured in dollars is going up because the value of the dollars are going down. And so you need more dollars to buy the same amount of stuff that you did before. And so although on paper it seems like you are making more, in reality you are making less. Right, so 600,000 is not the same as $62,500 per year. So people think, right, because they're just looking at the numbers, that they're making a lot more than people did in 1971, but in actual purchasing power, it's a lot less. And so this is the phenomena of nominal confusion, an expression that I heard from Lynette Zhang, who's over there in ITM trading. This idea of looking at the number and forgetting about the meaning of the number. And the same phenomena arises with housing stock prices. What makes it worse? Well, government spending, right? That's the inflation. What makes inflation worse? Government spending. They have to print the dollars that they need to purchase the things to fulfill the promises that they made to people, whether it's war, whether it's right, guns and butter, right? Whether it's war or domestic welfare, corporate welfare, all this other stuff. Well, you know, that's government spending, and there's not enough tax revenue to cover all the bills. So what they do is they borrow money, aka they print money, and now we're over $35 trillion of debt. Okay. Now, normally when you print more money, there has to be um, but now that we're in fiat world, it's through manufacturing that you are increasing, uh, the products that are going to be represented through the dollar, so they say. Um, but there's very little manufacturing. And so, if people stop selling to the United States, then it will take at least a few years for people to start making things again here in the United States. So there is going to be guaranteed at least 3 to 5 years of suffering here in the United States when the dollar collapses, right? When we finally slip into that hyperinflationary environment where a lot of people are no longer looking to the dollar as something that's reliable. And keep in mind that this is going to be a global phenomena, right? It's going to affect many, many countries, even outside of the United States. And that's because of the reserve currency status of the dollar. And some people say, in all fairness to the other side, some people will say because it is the reserve currency of the world, it will take, 5 to 10 years for this collapse, this monetary collapse that some people in the Austrian camp, Austrian economic school are talking about, which is fine by me, right? It'll give me time to make adjustments because I only found out about this, over the last, few years. And so trying to get my house in order is requiring a tremendous amount of effort and dragging it out maybe is better. I don't know. Maybe it's better if everything ended quickly. That way there won't be war overseas. So this constant money printing enables the United States to essentially bribe everyone in the world. Well, not everyone, literally, but basically to throw its weight around using dollars. I talked about this, I think, a year ago when I started just uploading my sermons, my Sunday sermons to this podcast because I was starting a new job and it was stressful, not really knowing what was expected and what I was supposed to do. For most of the previous school year last year, I was just uploading my sermons. And so as soon as it went to summer break, I went back to making videos and recordings like this. But anyway, so about a year ago, I discussed how the United States' ability to just simply print dollars as needed enabled them to basically bribe people. bribe entire countries like the Ukraine. Hey, we will pay for everything. You have no economy, so we'll pay for everything. So everyone will now be an employee of the United States of America. Yeah, we can do that because we just simply print out the money that we need. So this leads to absolute pure corruption. And more people are beginning to smell the stink of money printing, of inflation everywhere, especially because the United States is now using, I'm sure you know this already, because the United States has weaponized the dollar, that if you do not bow down to the wishes of the United States government, whoever is really pulling the strings, then the United States sanctions you, right? And from what I gather, the sanctions primarily come in the form of denying that country access to dollars because you need to use dollars to purchase things throughout the world. And so if the United States deprives you of dollars, then you can't really buy much of anything from another country. And sometimes the United States will even confiscate all of your assets and holdings that you have in different countries, right? And so basically, the United States has weaponized the dollar. And people don't like this, right? They don't like to be intimidated. They don't like to be told what to do, how to do it, whatever. And for a very long time, the United States was able to get away with it because militarily speaking, they were the strongest, most advanced. But that's not the case anymore. And that has been made obvious uh, over recent conflicts, but also a lot of people kind of understood this, that the United States it really doesn't win wars any longer. I mean, Afghanistan can't be considered a win. Iraq 1 and 2 can't be considered a win. So, militarily speaking, the United States is pretty weak. We don't have the kind of weapon systems that other countries have. We have nothing to stop it. So then where does that leave us? And so many countries are now attempting to leave this system and it's called the BRICS, right? So it used to mean simply Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But many other countries, including Turkey, an ally of the United States through NATO, wants to join BRICS. They want an alternative to all of the bullying that the United States is doing through their dollars. And this should not be surprising. Anyone who has ever been bullied when they were younger or was a bully when they were younger, then you understand the dynamic that it doesn't last forever. There is either a way out, just simply avoid the situation by like graduating, moving on to a different school, or the bully meets someone who's even bigger, right? And so the bully gets bullied. And so we know that it doesn't last forever. So US dominance in the world can not last forever. And war is basically the last gasp of a dying empire, which is why we most likely will see a hot war. Many people will die. And that's what really gets me angry, which is why I ranted a little bit in an episode recently. So the BRICS, they are getting together to try up a new monetary system, uh, maybe not to replace, but at least to be in competition with the United States and the dollar. And it's kind of interesting how the United States is trying to start wars, perhaps even to slow down the formation and the kickoff of BRICS. And the big thing about BRICS is that it does not include the United States. It doesn't need the United States. However, there is the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, which some people argue is behind a lot of the dollar's shenanigans. At the same time, the BIS is now inserting itself into the BRICS. And so you got to wonder who is actually pulling the strings, who actually is in control, and who are going to lose a lot. So the United States is trying to start wars with some of the countries that are trying to get the BRICS going. you know, it's just if you didn't know about the BRICS, if you didn't think about the BRICS, then it's kind of difficult. You all you have is the propaganda to believe. Like you can't entertain the possibility. You can't somehow um, understand or realize that there's a much, much bigger picture. Um, so once you have this sort of gold-backed or commodity-backed currency, then it becomes competition for the United States. I mean, the nuts and bolts of it, I really don't, there's a lot going on there. That's not my field of expertise. But all I need to know is that it's going to be competition for the dollar. And so these smaller countries, particularly African countries, now they have an alternative. Now they have a different system that they can use, not just the SWIFT system, the dollar system of the United States. And if that happens, if people start shifting over to the BRICS, that means there's less need and demand for the dollars, which means fewer people are going to be selling to the United States, which means that the United States is going to be in a very bad situation. Not just for the United States, but for any country that has tied its own currency to the dollar. Also, other countries which continue to trade with the dollar, it's going to be bad, which is why crypto can also be part of that competition, right? And that's what a lot of people believe. But I have to say that crypto makes me nervous. I mean, I would never stand in the way of anyone's freedom to use crypto in whatever manner they seem fit. And it just hit. It's over 68,000 I saw. I checked it before I started recording. And it was languishing between 59,000 to 60,000, 61,000. It was range bound, as they say. And now it's up to 68,000. So could it be going to the moon this time? Maybe. But it makes me nervous. Cryptos make me nervous, particularly in the way that the argument for Bitcoin has changed over the years. It went from being something very much anti-government to something strangely pro-government, right? Because they wanted an ETF, they needed government approval. And for the government to actually give approval means that something else is going on. Another thing that bothers me about cryptos in general, right? And plus, if everything's on the blockchain and you can see and track all of their ownership, how secret is that? Especially if now the government is involved with everything. But then again, what do I know? I'm sure there's a good explanation for all of it. The second thing that bothers me about cryptos, keeping in mind that yes, I do believe that it can be competition for the dollar, right? And so I would never stand in its way, but there's no use case, right? There's no use case for dollars. And so there's no use case for cryptos as well. You can't live in a crypto, you can't eat a crypto, you can't build with a crypto. It's virtual, right? And so there's no use case. But whatever. I look at crypto and I'm thinking, wow, I hope those guys at least you know, are setting aside, fiat, just in case everything goes sideways. But whatever. I think that many of the problems of the world today uh, comes from the fact that many people have lost the sense of value, right? So what has become more important than value and knowing what is valuable is just simply having the right position or belief uh, when it comes to a certain issue, like what's the right answer, right? So rather than understanding value, like where is the real value to be found, instead it's just, oh, I'm virtue signaling. So virtue signaling the right way, virtue signaling the correct virtues. That's what's more important, and value is with the virtue signaling, right? And so you're going to try to ignore the need for knowing value in the rest of your life. Right? You don't need to look anymore because I'm telling you what is the most virtuous thing ever. And so you just have to be on our side. And so you know what real value is. And so forget everything else. Uh, I would always conclude uh, all of my classes, in fact, at university at the end of the semester, like either the second or second to last lecture that I have with students before the end of the semester, I would say, so we've been looking at all these books, we're looking at all these readings, all these theories, and everyone has their own subjective view on what is good and what is valuable. But what is common, the common thread, and what enables all of us to pursue our own subjective interests is freedom, right? And so I would give this short presentation on freedom, right? That if we had freedom with responsibility, if that was the priority, if that was seen as most important, then most people would be so busy being happy that you would not have time to look at other people either screwing up or being happier or being happy too, right? So as long as we're happy, why would we mess up or like reduce our joy by minding other people's business, right? And if emphasis was on freedom, we wouldn't have to worry about elections because freedom could not be infringed. Candidates would campaign by fighting over who would protect freedom better, by how little they would do. And since politicians' salaries are low, no one would care on top of everything else, right? It's sort of like New Hampshire. I don't know if it's still true, but in New Hampshire, the annual salary of a lot of state politicians is 200 bucks. 200 bucks, that's it, right? So not 200,000, but 200 bucks, right? And so no one wants to be a politician in that state, and that's the idea, right? Uh, if you're going to do something, then you are going to want to do it. It's not for the money. Something beeped and I have no idea what it is. Hopefully, I'm still recording, but I'll just press on. Uh, People then would have to rely on exchanging ideas to discover morality. Keeping in mind that tradition and culture used to be the best ideas at one point for a group of people living in a certain area. But then change happened, right? Change entered the picture, and then everything had to be rethought. Then you have tradition, then you have nouveau, right? You have what is that, neo or the liberals, right? So then you have the clash of how we should proceed, how we should move forward. But as long as there's freedom, then everything will be determined through the grassroots of determining value in any day, in every context, no matter the technology. Uh, it's the masses that decide what is actually moral. It's not a group of people virtue signaling that's telling everyone what is in fact moral. You just have to hitch your train to my engine, and then we're good. Uh, and I trust this system because the best ideas are the most moral ideas, right? You'll have people who are immoral who will try to do things that go against the grain, that try to promote and legislate immorality. But the thing is, most people won't have it. Most people will not accept it. In fact, most people would try to punish that immoral behavior, whatever it is, and through a variety of ways. There's no one set way to punish anything. And so the best ideas, the vast majority of people would be living with the best ideas, living the most moral life, a good life, right? But for this to happen, we need a unit of account, a stable measure of value, a commodity. It's not going to be fiat, right? But it's probably going to be something that is backed by gold, if not gold itself. And if you're a bimetallist, right, you want silver in there too. Okay, fine, silver too, right? So the next few years, we're going to see a lot of uh, resolution of this debate, of this question, of this problem. Like, what is the best way to exchange value, to preserve value? And once we decide on that, once the world has come to a decision as to what that is, then the search for morality will return and will continue to challenge and re-challenge established understandings of right and wrong, good and bad, right? So that's it for this episode, right? What the gold price says to me. I will talk to you next time. Hopefully, you'll have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next week.